Jacob died when he was 16. We didn't think that God had a reason to take him out of our lives. I didn't think that God had a reason to take him out of our lives. And he was full of life and he was full of love and energy. I didn't see why God took him away from us. When Jake died, I died spiritually and my faith died with him. I thought that God had no reason to take him away and I hated God for it. At the funeral, there must have been over hundreds of cars in the procession, and the line to go see the casket was incredible. I would have never imagined that when a teenager died that so many people would have been that touched, that they came just to show their support. My brother's best friend, who barely knew Jake, came, and he went all by himself just to show his support for the fact that he was a classmate and for the fact that Jake had died. You never really realize that someone's dead until you've gone up to the casket and you see them. And you always think that when someone's standing up there that they'll be thinking about the memories they had with someone, and they'll be thinking about, how happy they were when they were around. But really what you're thinking is you're like, start moving now. Move now. This is a joke. I know that you're actually alive. You're not dead. But then they don't move, and you realize that they're not coming back and that they're gone forever. Even though you may see them in heaven, you may not. And there's always that possibility that someone said they're Christian, but they really didn't have that reliance on God that you thought they did. Jake's brother, Zach, also told a story at his funeral about how every night before they went to bed, they used to knock 3 times on the wall to signify I love you. Zach told us about how the fact that night he knocked on the wall and there was no reply. And he would continue to knock on the wall and there would never be another reply, because Jake had died and Jake wasn't there and Jake wasn't going to be able to reply. It was probably the most touching thing I've ever seen. When Zach went up to the casket, he stroked his brother's head. He didn't care that Jake was dead or that Jake's body was dead and he wasn't in there. He cared about the fact that that was his brother and that was someone he loved, and that he wasn't coming back, and that he was never going to be able to touch him again or to see him again or to smile at him. He would never be able to do that again. When Jake died, I felt like I was all alone. Like no one would ever understand what I was going through, and no one would ever care enough to understand what I was going through. I lost all of my faith, and I lost all of my faith in God. I hated God, and I lost all of my faith when Jacob died, because I thought there was no point in living. If I wasn't going to be able to do that when I was his age, if I was going to die from that, if my friends would die from that, what is the point of going on? There was no point. Until I realized that through that experience, I was going to be changed, and I was going to find an everlasting faith, an everlasting joy, an everlasting satisfaction through God. Jake's brother Zach told a story about how he was the last one to talk to him on the phone. Teens always think that they have, that one last time. They'll just do this one more time and then it'll be okay and it'll be over and they won't need it anymore. But little do you realize that could be your last time living. Zach talked about the fact that he had called Jake to see what he was doing and see when he'd be home, and Jake said they were going out for one last race. But Jake didn't know that last race, that last moments in his life would be the last moments of his life. And he didn't realize how not only would it be his last moments, but his friend Brad's last moments, who was driving the car. Their choices to do one last race killed the both of them. Their choices to drink that night killed the both of them. Jake will never realize what he's put us through. And I almost don't want him to know, because you wonder if he would have done or chosen things differently that night. You wonder if he wouldn't have gone out for that last race if he would have known what it would do to him. It's terrible what happened to him because the choices that he made are still affecting people 5 years later, and they still will be 10 years later, because every time one of my friends talks about the fact that they're drinking, I think, what if what happened to Jake happened to them? And what if that one choice, that one time, you're just going to try a drink, or you're just going to try the drugs, or you're just going to race one time? What if that's the one time that kills you? It was amazing. I went to the graduation for Francis Hall North when my brother's best friend graduated, and that was the class that Jake was supposed to graduate in. You would think that, that many years later that they would have kind of forgotten about it, tried to forget about it so that they could just be happy on that day, but when we walked into graduation, we noticed that everyone who was graduating had a button, and it had Jake on it, or it had Brad on it, and it said "Forever in Our Hearts." And it just makes you realize how God, even though some of these people aren't Christian, they still think about it, and it's still in the back of their mind that someone died from drinking and driving, and it's still affecting people today. I don't even remember the last time I saw him, other than the funeral, which I wish I did, and I wish I remembered the last words I said to him, and I wish I remembered the last thing he said to me, but I just have to remember the fact that we shared amazing times and that he was one of my best friends, and he forever will be my best friend. Jake is eternally going to be in my heart because now, with everything that I do and with every choice I make, I think of him, and I think of the fact that maybe I could die by doing something, and that maybe I would be leaving my family and my friends behind, and even though I might have fun while I'm doing it, that I could die and that people wouldn't have fun if I died. That wouldn't be something I would ever wish to put someone through. When someone dies, God has to take you through that, and even though I didn't have God in the beginning, I still got through it, but it was much easier with God because he just eased my pains, and even though I still had that sorrow and I was still mourning over Jake dying, I had the internal satisfaction and the knowingness that it was going to be okay. And even if things didn't go the way I wanted, and if they didn't end up the way I wanted, and if the things in between didn't go exactly how I planned, God had a plan, and God knew exactly what was going to happen, and in the end I would be eternally with God, and that's the most important thing. But had Jake not died, I may still not have known that, and I wouldn't be in this chair, and I wouldn't be talking about it, and I wouldn't know God the way I do today. God wouldn't matter to me because I'd probably be doing the things that Jake did when he died. I'd probably be doing the same things he did hours before he died, and I'd probably be the same.